Thank you for joining me and Ronit for our third memoir chat. We actually had some questions, so we're so excited to dive into those as soon as Ronit joins me. I also just wanted to say, just like right here at the top, writing our stories is a revolutionary act. Oh, Ronit.
Hello, I'm here on time. How's it going?
It's going. I was just going to start out by saying that writing our stories is a revolutionary act, right? Going out word by word, speaking about our truth, being seen, and getting out there
Yes.
is powerful.
Yeah,
And
I
I
feel like
think,
part of the first step is to decide you can do this.
right? That is that's I think that was the longest part of my writing process was deciding I could do that part. Because it can be very intimidating. And I think also a lot of us deal with imposter syndrome. And had a call with one of my writing mentors last week, and I just said, I deal with it. I grapple with it. And she said, well, I invite you to consider, what does an imposter look like? And I thought that was a really powerful way of reframing it, because I would never call anybody that I know an imposter. Why would I call
Right.
myself that?
Right. Why is that the self-talk?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
So,
Especially for someone like you. And this goes for all of us, but you are so generous and so giving of your time and also of your support that imposter syndrome in your head seems to be some iteration of you or a person who wouldn't care that much about you.
yes, I think that's accurate. Um, so thank you for those who are joining us currently and will join us later. I was saying we're so thrilled we have questions. We had questions.
We do have questions today. I think we're really heading for the big time, Alyson.
I was like, questions, and ones that we can discuss, because one was from Elizabeth about, this thing that we discuss, writing from the scar and not the wound. And
Yes,
then,
and you sent me such a great piece by Heather Demetrius, right?
yeah, I thought that was really, I loved the quote. I brought it up on my computer. What
Mm,
I, if my hands are fully occupied in holding on to something, I can neither give nor receive. By Dorothy Soleil. I don't know how to S-O with an umlaut,
yep.
L-E. Um, and I thought that was a beautiful way to talk about, because Marisa was like, well, isn't it just kind of like, if you're writing from the wound, like, yeah, it's not as good as if you're writing from the scar, which I think is certainly one of the things. But I thought this was a beautiful articulation of, if we're too deep in it, if we're holding our pain too tightly, or it's all we can hold, it's difficult to really share it in a way, I think, that is meaningful to others.
It's hard to get any light or air in there.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I feel not only just the holding and being occupied in the hands, but also the tight holding on to things
Mm-hmm.
when you're not being open. You can't allow things to move you when you are so occupied with the one thing in front of you only. And there's a time and a place for that too, right? There's a time and a place to dig into something and not let go. For example, if you have a project that you're intent on finishing by a certain time, or the confidence that you need to shut away and to brush off the imposter syndrome. But when it comes to allowing things to fall onto you and to give out and to kind of exchange the energy and figure out what's really going on, that always, in my opinion, comes from vulnerability and curiosity.
Mm-hmm. I think also, like you're saying, if it is, you're holding it tightly, it's harder to find those all those little connections, which is something I really love in memoir. Is oftentimes you will find all these things throughout a life or an experience that connect to this thing you're writing about. That oftentimes the essays or the memoirs that I find the most engaging aren't about the one thing. They can't
No,
really be. Um, and
no,
I
that
think in order to be open to those associations, we have to be able to step back a little from the material.
which speaks directly to that idea of structure that we got a question about
Mm-hmm.
today. just about, how you find the thread and the structure. But I wanted to add, if you want to stick with the Heather Demetrius scar
Mm-hmm.
versus wound for a minute, I also took out something that I wanted to share. She writes in this post that we're talking about and can you hear, is my volume okay?
Yes.
Okay. When you teach or write from the scar, you come into some wisdom about something. There's clarity, equanimity. You're a lava rock, not lava,
Mm-hmm.
formed by whatever the event in your life was, but no longer dangerous and wild in your mind about it. When you write or teach from the wound, you're writing from a place of unresolved pain. You're angry, but not the cool anger of the Queen of Swords, of Cersei Lannister, of Rosa Parks on the bus. Anger that has been skillfully wielded into the sharpest of swords. You're hurting, and that is writing that way. And I think this conversation has come up in at other times when I'm doing talks or when people are gathered to talk about memoir. And I think that I, first of all, am wary of rules. I think that
Yeah.
we all have to find our way. Just as I would never say, if you're not waking up at 4 a.m. and writing every day, you're not a writer. I would never say, well, if you're writing this way, that's not right. I mean, I would never say that.
No,
But I would say that I think the wound has a lot of power to it
for
and
sure.
has a lot of momentum in it. And when you write from that really urgent place, sometimes you just grab something that you can't bottle up any other kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of lashing out or the wound in a memoir, I think it's really important that it's not a retribution story. It's not a
Mm-hmm.
get back or throw someone under the bus story. And the memoir is from this later place in your life or understanding, whether it's 5 years, 50 years,
Mm-hmm.
a year, that you kind of see something that you didn't understand before about the wound.
I agree. And I think she says in here, she likes to actually write from the wound, but edit from the scar, which I also
So
thought,
I love that. When I
yeah.
saw that, in fact, that is writing from the wound, edit from the scar. Brilliant. And I think that that answers that question for people who say, but aren't you supposed to write from urgency too?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. But I do think that that is the difference between throwing everything on your page for a manuscript and then saying it's ready to go because you captured everything,
Mm-hmm.
and giving it time and letting it cure, and putting your mature and maybe more perspective eyes on it later.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think sometimes you'll and it goes back to kind of that Roxane Gay thing about not cannibalizing yourself. And I think that is
Can you
that
repeat that a little
place.
bit for people who haven't?
Oh yeah. So Roxane Gay, I should have the full
No, just like
quote,
the idea.
but
Yeah.
she talks about it a lot when she's talking about memoir, and she talks about it in her memoir, not Bad Feminist, but the other one.
Hunger?
Hmm?
Hunger?
Yes. That how important it is not to cannibalize ourselves as writers. That we need to know, and that's different for each of us, like what it is that is sacred to us. That isn't something we
Ah,
want to share.
yes.
That is essential to us. That is not shareable. Um,
Yes.
and to know what that is, and that if an editor says, "Hey, I'd like more of this," and you don't want to do it, don't do it. If an audience
Yes,
says that,
yes. And I feel like that speaks a little bit to, I feel like I was recently having ideas for posting stuff on
mm-hmm.
Instagram,
Mm-hmm.
or I thought, oh, I need to, and this is not what we're here to talk about is our platforms, but oh, I have to do another reel. I have to get engagement. I have to. And then I realized I don't want to be a clown.
Right.
And that's different from what Roxane Gay is saying, but
Mm-hmm.
is similar in the sense of grabbing parts of yourself that you would normally not grab to
Mm-hmm.
try to get attention or to try to make the cut or to try to get someone to take you seriously or whatever it is. Not everything is up for grabs.
No, no, and you have to know what that is for you. And
Yeah.
Marisa just asked, I've had classmates write memoir that takes place at the exact time as they're living in. What do you guys think about that? Ronit?
Well, I mean, I've heard again and again. Hi, also. Am I saying it right, Marisa? Is that right? Just say yes. I
Marisa?
know I got it wrong.
I think it's
Marisa or
Marisa.
Marisa? Okay, not Marissa, like one of my
It's
therapists.
definitely not Marisa.
I'm waiting for
She's
the
not
emoji.
your therapist.
I'm waiting for the emoji to come in with either like the stink eye at me that really screwed that up again, or the thank you because I finally figured it out. I think that when I was in my grad program, there was a student who was working with one of my teachers, and I had heard that because the student had gone through a recent disruption in marriage, the memoir was about this time, but they were pretty recently a new single mom, and Alice is correct. Okay, Marisa, I did it.
Nice. Mm-hmm.
Right? I did it.
Yes.
And I'm sorry, I'm the worst. I'm so squirrely when it comes to these lives. I'll just ignore the feed down there for a while. So the idea was that she had been
Hashtag relatable. Okay, go ahead.
Really? You're so good at it. I feel like we're going to
I
talk.
think for everyone, right?
Okay. Listen, we do have to make you laugh a little bit. We don't want to just be sobery, memoir chatty. We have to,
No.
we are here to make each other laugh too.
For
So,
sure.
yeah.
Yes, your person writing about a marital disruption.
Yeah, so that had been a fairly recent divorce, a fairly recent separation, and there had been a little bit of discussion in the workshop about how she may not be ready yet to, not to write it, but to really form it and find the threads and the shape. And I think, again, like Marisa, I again don't want to be pedantic about any of this stuff, and one size definitely doesn't fit all. I'm sure someone has dropped a memoir out of themselves. That sounded terrible. That hatched out of the egg, really great, and just needed to massage it a little bit. Wow, those metaphors are all over the place. Okay, so anyway, but I think that so my memoir changed. I can speak from my experience, and I'm sure you're writing one now too, Alyson. I'm imagining there are pieces that you wrote a while ago and pieces you're writing now. Is that true? Right? So is there a difference for you in the way you're approaching the material from before and now?
That's a good question. And I was also thinking about,
Hi, Elizabeth.
I don't know if this is, we're talking about your question, Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Marisa, for me, it's like, it's not about writing about something that you're going through now. It's not, because I mean, to be honest, like some of the trauma I experienced 20 years later, I was still living in the wound. For me, it's not like a logical way forward. Trauma doesn't work. I keep telling everyone this, but if you've not read Sarah Polley's Run Toward Danger and Towards the Danger and the essay about trauma, I highly recommend it, especially if you're a memoirist writing about trauma. And if you're not writing about trauma, kudos. But she talks.
As Philip Lopate would say, you should hope that you have some trauma, so you have a book in your yeah.
Still are. Yeah. Because her essay is so. It does, for me, it's a great piece of writing about how trauma affects our memories and how like as a witness or as a writer, like people who have lived through trauma are like the worst, right? Because we don't tell it one time and it's that way forever. Like that's just
how trauma
the way
is.
It works.
Memory is not even, and as one of the people I had on my podcast said, just because it's an emotional memory or a really difficult memory and you feel that it had a giant impact on you does not mean it's more accurate or linear.
So I would say that I don't necessarily think it's the time or how long has passed, or for me, it's the relationship to it. And because, we're often instructed to write about where the heat is, right? The thing that is like getting us in our solar plexus or wherever we get the heat. And I do think I think you can write from that place, but definitely the editing is important. And I have read, it's not really a whole book that I've read, but I have definitely read essays where I think, where was the editor? Like, this is not okay. Like that this person is putting this out into the world and that somebody didn't say, whoa, like this is really personal.
Yes.
And it's going to live here forever. And
yes.
And that's the time I've really felt like, ugh, it makes me uncomfortable.
Yes.
And
I know
angry, to be honest.
And we just got a question what the book was called. It was called Run Toward Danger.
Run Towards the Danger.
That's right.
By Sarah Polley. She's a Canadian actress and she's like a very big deal in Canada. And this essay specifically was about her experiences. She was raped by Gian Ghomeshi, who there was a huge trial about him. She did not take part in it. And so it's her reflections about why she didn't take part in it, why she was advised not to take part in it, how trauma operates, how victims are rarely served by the justice system. I don't even like calling it the justice system anymore. The legal system.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yes.
it's really I just thought it was really beautifully articulated, and
I'll have to read that.
yeah.
I think that's the second time I've heard you say something about it, and I have to move on that and get it. So I also want to say that, there's something to be said if you were going through something that was very, very painful and you knew in your writer's gut that it was material, that you were going to need to revisit it because you're hashing it out for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing to say that you couldn't use those original passages and edit them later and then
Right.
be in conversation with them. I mean, how interesting would it be as a memoir to introduce or kind of interject within the scene the stuff that you know now that you're looking back on? I mean, that's kind of what memoir is. And I think that also, I mean, I would never say those students that Marisa is in class with shouldn't do what they're doing, but maybe they won't publish it right now. Maybe it'll be later. It's so good to get things down when they're fresh.
That's true.
And sometimes you don't even know the story. You know what I liken this to? This is a funny analogy, but in the 80s, I remember thinking, we don't have a style like the 50s or the 60s. There is no style here. And now I'm so clearly seeing what the 80s are. And then I said the same thing.
And 90s.
For the 90s too. What are you even talking about? We're normal in the 90s. There's nothing weird here. But then you look back and you can kind of see it better. And similarly, I never thought I had another idea for a memoir aside from this childhood one. But now I could see that in 10 or 20 years, I could definitely be in a position to write about the encapsulated time of, I don't know, young motherhood or my adult relationship with my mom, stuff that's way too close for me to do now, but that I'll have a lot better perspective on later.
I can see that. I was actually talking to the same mentor about this question, and she's written a few memoirs, and she was saying, she's done for now. Like after this next book, which will be a craft book, she was saying she's going to turn to fiction. Like that she has mined her experience for multiple memoirs, but then it's like, okay.
Now I have to go live a little more, or think a little more, ruminate a little bit more. What was our other, so then we were going to talk about the wound and
structure.
And form. Structure. And so I was thinking about this last night because I think that the structure, I've mentioned this before, and I did take some notes, so I'm looking down a little bit because I don't want to forget anything.
Way to take notes, Ronit.
I really
like
did.
it.
This is me late last night. I was like, okay, what do I want to say? But I won't just blah, blah, blah.
And I agree with Elizabeth. That is a great analogy to 80s style.
Thank you. I have never made the analogy like that before, but I've been thinking about that 80s thing for a long time because I was like, I was so dumb not to see we had a style. but then I'm like, there's no story here. I'm just living my life. And then later on, oh, look at that crap I was doing. So I think that a really quick answer, a very quick answer to the structure issue, which will come up again and again, and it is really so important. And I've said this before. I really want to know my structure and my container for my story so I could feel free to spread my wings and write it. But I did not know what the structure should be until I'd spent some time with my story and written it. And so it's kind of a chicken or the egg. So the structure will become clearer to you. What structure or thread you need will become clearer to you when you know what your story is about. And I don't mean the nuts and bolts of the story, like the top story. I don't mean the characters, the places. I mean, or the A to B of what happens. I mean the relationship you have now with the you in the time frame of the memoir and the patterns you see in the then you. So I'm making that the then hyphen you. So this is a little like in fiction, I would say, and someone might tell me I'm wrong about this, but I was thinking about it, a little like the theme or the hero's journey in fiction terms. What is it that you in the memoir need to learn or understand? What have you come to see about your pattern or the who that you were? This will make the structure and container a lot easier to find because you realize the scenes that have to be in your memoir are only the ones that illustrate this, either the way you're growing or the way you're not growing, either the way, for example, let's say your main story is about grappling with the death of a loved one, for example. Well, you're still grappling now with the loved one's death, and you could argue that, well, then where does it end? I'm always grappling with the death of a loved one. Right. But, so what is a good starting point? What is a good end point for that? How would you know? But probably the end point could be a significant event or scene that solidified something for you and gave you clarity about the person or your relationship, how they really felt about you, what their mysterious other life was, or did you in fact fail them the way you felt you did? You know, whatever. I'm just throwing some things out.
Yeah, yeah.
It's sort of an answer to the question that you're asking at the very beginning of the memoir. And the
Yes.
beginning of the memoir is when you set up what the problem is for you as the character you. And that would begin maybe with a scene, for example, if this is the main story of your memoir, a scene with this person in question, a memory from childhood, a scene in the present tense, and then you can go present day, and then you can go back and decide what stays and what doesn't. And I mean, look, we just read, just quickly to wrap this up, and there's so much more to say about this, but This Boy's Life by Tobias Wolff is generally just a chronological memoir of childhood. It begins when he's like 10. It ends when he's going into high school. It doesn't spend any time in his adult life, like at all. Hollywood Park by Mikel Jolet is based around his mother's mental illness and his relationship with his father. It starts in early childhood, goes until he's pretty old. After Stanford, he's grown up. But the relationship, the reason it's like that is because we're talking about how he's grown and what he's learned from his relationship with his father. So there's a lot of time there. But then you look at something like Beautiful Country, which we just read, and those chapters are called Dumplings, Graffiti, right? It's called Marilyn, which is about her kitty. So she's organized it by the elements in her life that were really significant here. So there's so many ways to do this. You can also do a braided memoir with history, like Inara Verzinik, who I'm saying that right, wrote this beautiful book that takes place in Latvia and in the States, Among the Living and the Dead. And she anchors her story with history about Latvia and the war, you know, and that's kind of her structure. So, I mean, there's endless. You could
There
be
are
like
endless. And
endless. You
for
could
sure.
be like the favorite foods you ate. Those are going to each be a chapter.
Well, and I think Theo Nestor, I did one of her like
Oh, yeah.
Hedgewood virtual classes, and she talks a lot about it, like the spine. Same thing you were saying, you know, what is the spine of your story from beginning to end? And like you said, everything that you write about needs to serve that. What transformation did your character go through, like the hero's journey? And I think where for me, I definitely needed some kind of like I'm writing memoir and essays because that's how my brain works. And I needed a unifying concept for me so that I wasn't just like writing all over the place. And I found one that works for me. And I think that like Run Towards the Danger, since I just brought that up, like her memoir is 9 times she ran toward the danger. That is what the essay collection is about. Melissa Febos's Girlhood's about the experience and reflections on girlhood. It can be I just read one by Cindy House, Mother Noise, and it's about her experiences coming to terms with and sharing with her child that she had been a heroin addict. So
right.
it's
So
about,
then that's very interesting how she would structure that. Can you speak a little bit about
well, you know, it's really just like, it is that kind of spine. Like it can jump all over the place. Like it can be about her actual addiction. It can be about her relationship with her child unrelated to her heroin addiction. You know,
But
it's really
all
just
kind
a
of
unifying concept.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The thread or the unifying concept. And you can, and to say, you might need to write a bunch to figure it out. And sometimes you need a mentor or you need readers to help tell you what is so going to be plain and clear for you later. I didn't understand what mine was. I really didn't. I was a child when my stuff happened. And I thought, what do you mean? What role? I don't understand. I mean, truly, I was like, what are you talking about? But I finally got it a little bit, and I saw the pattern going again and again. And your job as a memoirist is to make sure the pattern is really clear, not redundant, not too slippery so the reader doesn't get it. You want to let the reader know that you understand. You're in control as the writer, and you're showing to the reader, look at the stuff I did. Can you believe I kept doing this? Or how did I keep finding myself in this situation? And then I don't think any reader wants to read that over and over again, with added,
I really
it's
don't.
candy at the
I am
store.
like really not that reader.
No.
I'm like, I need to move.
I want to move and I want to feel like I need to see what happens. And readers want that. And it's not that hard to do in terms of the way you end your chapters and things like that. And
yes, it will be available later.
Yes, it will be
Mrs.
available.
Old Geezer, it will be available later.
I love that.
That's the best name ever. And I was thinking on your Ugh, I had a thought, and now Mrs. Old Geezer,
about
you
that.
had too good of a handle, and it completely distracted me. About essays specific, but
Memoir and essays, memoir and essays, maybe. Like I was
something
thinking
about
of
that.
the part that burns with Janine Olette, which I wanted to mention because
Mm-hmm.
that's a memoir and essays, and the structure there is really just all the beautiful essays she wrote, and they're very different. They're all very
Mm-hmm.
different, and they exist in and of themselves, but
Mm-hmm.
they also speak to her whole experience. And so, I mean, I just say, oh, that's what I want to say. Nothing is wasted, which we talked about last time,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
I feel like what Alyson you were saying is you don't want to write about just everything. You want to focus on the stuff that means something to this memoir.
Mm-hmm.
And also for people who are just grappling with what their story is, you just have to sit and write. Like I said, I had to write and write and write, and there were a lot of scenes I didn't use that I
Mm-hmm.
may or may not be able to use for something else
Mm-hmm.
that I liked, that I spent a lot of time, trying to describe, right? But they didn't make it into the book because they were for me and they're
Yeah.
not for my reader. And I
Yeah.
really has anyone ever read a book, a memoir especially, where you're just like, okay, I get it, but why this, and why more of this, and can we please, I need to know more about this. And I don't want a memoirist, I'm speaking for all of us here, so you can bow out if you want. I don't want a memoirist who's just like, I don't know why all this is happening, I don't know, this is so weird. Like, I don't want to be a horse with the blinders on at Central Park.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be a memoirist who is smart enough to understand and be a step ahead of your readers and what they might think about this. And that's also why your readers and your workshop groups are so important.
Yes, and I think I just read a memoir about horses. So that was The Year of the Horse by Courtney Mom, which I thought was a really interesting when you were talking about Braided, because hers is about her present day experience going back to horseback riding and her previous experiences, her childhood experiences that have led her to this deep depression that only a horse can get her out of. And it
That
was,
reminds me of H is for Hawk. Did you read H is
oh
for Hawk?
yeah, yeah.
No.
Um, it was beautiful, and really almost every memoir they're all different, and I want, and as I'm working more on the structure of mine, I do feel like I want it to be a reflection of me, and I am less apologetic about that and more excited, like, oh, how am I gonna do this in a way that feels like it's from me.
Oh,
um,
yeah.
and that sort of, and I wanted to say about a memoir that doesn't have movement or that doesn't have urgency. I think that that's when that whole, like, it's a diary argument people like to toss out, which I find hilarious. Have these people ever read diaries? Like, they're not that interesting. My diaries were literally like, I love Brandon, he doesn't love me back. So that's not going to make it in the final draft. So I just like, what are
No,
you
and
going
that's
to,
also the
Courtney?
difference between the autobiography, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I just think memoirists, I didn't know much about memoir up until a couple of years ago or 5 years ago, but I just think people who read memoirs, oh, that's my dog, or one of them, I feel like there's three, and they're very angry right now. But I think
They
that,
want to be heard.
yes, people who read memoir want to feel, I think. I mean, I feel like
Mm-hmm.
give me the meat, give me all of it. And I also want to live in your shoes. I want to understand what it's like, which is why Beautiful Country, I really felt I had lived with the
Mm-hmm.
author for a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So whereas there might not have been as much tension all the time throughout, though there was some in the book, in the chapters, I felt I had inhabited
It
a
was
bit
immersive.
experience. And so it kept me reading for
Mm-hmm.
that because it was so different and it was immersive that way.
It was completely immersive. Where mine is like, I want you to just be immersed. Like, here, this is what it's like in my head, and here's some of the things I've experienced. I think you can have all kinds of different immersive experiences, but this has been my directive for my writing probably for the last 7 years, is like, I won't want to write things that I want to read. So
Yes.
and that is like, makes it a lot harder because
Well, you cut
I
through.
like to be entertained.
No, definitely. And that's why sometimes when I start something a couple of sentences in, even a short piece, I'm like, what the heck is this? This is so boring. But sometimes if I sit there and I push through, I just was
Mm-hmm.
like, you know, doing something yesterday that I was excited about. I love it when, who doesn't love it when you sit down to write and you actually get excited about what you've got on the page, what's
Okay,
happening.
that's nice.
Such a
Hmm.
good feeling.
It is a great feeling.
But
And I
move
want
to
to,
that. That's what I would say as writers. We should move to that. You know, if we have a scene in front of us that is going to be a little arduous to get
mm,
down and it's a pain in the neck, reward yourself with something fun. Do some kind of
mm.
stream of consciousness exercise, or let yourself write a tiny little poem for a minute. Just do something fun to remind yourself why you're writing.
Yeah, and again, I don't know if we've mentioned it here, but small increments are an incredibly powerful way to write at all, but particularly to write about the hard stuff. Like, do not sit down in your writing space or stand or lay or whatever you do and think, I'm going to spend the next 3 hours writing about this terrible thing. Don't do it. It's too
No.
long. Like you can't
No,
just
you
be
can
like,
set a timer like
yeah,
Janine Olette says, or Laura
10
Davis says
minutes.
you can light a candle,
Yeah.
and light a candle makes the space sort of a safe space for you. And when you
Hmm.
blow out the candle, 20 minutes, half hour, you're done for the day on that.
Yes. Yeah, my therapist said like when I'm writing about something that particularly something that's transporting me to that place, to make sure like when I'm done to ground myself, to do the like five things I see, five things I smell, five things I hear, five things that I'm me now.
Yeah,
I'm
so
not me
important.
then. And because sometimes, I'll have a writing hangover and I hate that
Is it
because my
also a little like a vulnerability hangover, a writing slash vulnerability hangover, or
yeah, but it's also like being in that place that you're just like, ugh. It like almost feels like you're covered in like caramel. Like it's just like, ugh.
slimy, slimy,
Yeah, and sticky and like immovable and unwash-offable. Like
gunky? Yeah.
yeah, and I am a mom and I'm around my kids and I don't want to carry that with me then in my interactions with them. So it's
You
like,
know,
how do I and even just having the awareness that I have that feeling and
yeah.
then talking about it out loud has helped me not have it since.
And isn't that also a trauma? Something that helps with trauma in general is to notice what's right in front of you to ground yourself. You
Hmm.
know, when you're having a hard time, just to try to get your senses going and try to ground yourself a little bit. Is that right?
When you're dealing with trauma, yeah.
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 I want to ask you something. I know we're hitting a half hour,
Yes.
but I had a question for you that has to do with how you're approaching writing trauma.
Hmm.
What Roxane Gay says about not cannibalizing yourself, and also what Janine Olette mentioned. Two things that I've learned from her is that it's sometimes the how you write it is just as important as the why or the what. So
Yeah.
the way that you get into your trauma, whether that's a fragmented type of piece or something that you
Hmm.
avoid exactly the scene that you don't want to write. You might not have to write certain scenes because the reader will understand
Hmm.
if you go into a more of a dissociative reporting of it. That's how
Hmm.
she did some of her work.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering how when you're writing trauma. Um, Oh, I see that Marisa says I can only write about 2 sentences in 20 minutes, though. I don't know if she means like when it comes to the trauma stuff. Maybe
Hmm.
so, but slowly, surely, right?
Hmm.
But I guess what I want to ask is, how do you know, as when you're writing trauma, what you must sit yourself down and write, that you're going to do and grapple with, and when you need to let yourself off the hook and not share something with readers?
Mm.
Do you know that yet, as a writer of a memoir that deals with trauma yet?
I mean, I know there's certain things I'm going to write about, and she talks about in Hunger, like, or maybe she was talking about hunger, but maybe that's what it was. I should put the link, and I'm not going to have it on me. There's an amazing YouTube video where Roxane Gay, Tracy McMillan, um, Therese Mayette, Audrey Hirsch, and Rashid, they talk about writing trauma. It's like an hour-long lecture. It's amazing, and I highly recommend it. And she talks about how people oftentimes, and I've experienced this in life with my writing, as they want to like know the details.
Yeah.
Where was he? Where were you? What was happening? Like a forensic report. No, I'm not writing that.
Mm.
Um, and I have no interest in writing that. And to be honest, I have no interest in reading that.
Mm.
I don't want to read that. I don't need to know who did what to who. I need to know about the aftermath and how you dealt with
Be effective.
however that made you feel. Um, and if you're here for trauma porn, I'm not your person. Like, I'm about what do we do now?
Yeah, with
Because
it. That reminds me of what
you
Kelly
know,
Sundberg said. She wrote it in her book. is it Good Night, Sweet Girl or Goodbye, Sweet Girl? Goodbye, Sweet Girl. She wrote it in her book about domestic abuse at the hands of her husband. And at the end, toward the end, she offered a scene or two and she said, and this is what you've been waiting for, isn't it? Because she wanted to call out to the readers. She knew some readers wanted more of this violence or were waiting for the actual violence. And some didn't really care about it, but she wanted to call it out. Yeah. Yeah. Also, Alyson, is it really only Memoir Chat number 3?
I think so. Am I
Did you
lying?
just put something in the chat?
I think that Marisa put
Because I was
the
going to
panel
say, you'll have
video
to
in
teach
the
me how
chat.
to do that. How do you
Look
do
at
that while you're living?
you can do it, but it's like you can't go elsewhere. You can't navigate elsewhere.
No, I'll lose
I
you and
can't.
it'll all be a
No,
disaster.
don't do it.
Try it.
No, but Marisa put the panel that I was talking about, which is just really. I also just love all those people on that panel, and so just hearing them talk about their experiences writing trauma. And I think for me, like the more that I have expanded my, I don't like the word network because it sounds businessy, but the more that I've expanded my community of writers, I realize that we're all grappling with the same things. Whether you've written no books or 10 books or, I find it less lonely when we're sharing what we're going through together. And I do want to say, given the events that we're going through right now, I am very grateful for all the things in my life that remind me about what I treasure and what I care for. And community is like the thing that has gotten me through the darkest days of my life. So I'm grateful for each of you. And I'm really grateful to you, Ronit, for creating this opportunity in this relationship.
You created it. I want to say that I felt that we didn't talk about the hard times. We launched right into it, but I think art, diversity, support, expression, all those things, the celebration of what we can use our voice for, and really celebrating art, which I was able to do at a play yesterday. I just felt so much more human and like there's good in the world. And so listening to other people express themselves, lifting other people up, having these conversations and making space for each other, I think is an antidote. It helps. It is something to help us feel a little bit better while we do those other nuts and bolts things, So I guess thank you we're just over a half hour and you will find this on both of our feeds.
We'll post it soon, barring any technical.
Oh my gosh, I won't say anything. I'm not going to jinx anything, but so far.
And yes, and if these chats, that's right, Elizabeth, we are in the revolution. And I feel like if these chats or these conversations or any of this like helps anybody believe in their words and their story, then we have done a service. And I am proud to be a part of that because each of us has a story to tell. And if anyone's telling you yours isn't worth the time that you're spending on it, F them.
Yeah, F them.
So that's what we're here to say.
Also, I want to thank the people who showed up today.
Yes.
To make their schedules work. And thank you for your
questions and comments.
We like the comments and the questions. Yeah, we'll do this again next month.
Yes, we will.
Right?
So goodbye for now.
Bye. Thanks for being here.